keep finding ways that we're helping partners finding either, balance in their life or focus or purpose.
Practices that are going to help improve your project management skills or your finances.
We're here to talk about setting long-term goals and then how to achieve them.
Increasing your quality, therefore becoming the best place in town to work. Welcome to Academy Live.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on Academy Live. We are continuing Cybersecurity Awareness Month this October. So today's show, we're going to bring on Paul Redding. Paul is the Vice President of Channel and Cybersecurity at Compliancy Group. He's formerly the CEO of an MSP. Paul brings a wealth of experience in both cybersecurity and compliance. Over the years, he has provided guidance to numerous healthcare, manufacturing, and other regulated sections on essential security protocols, ensuring their adherence to legal and industry standards. In his current role with Compliancy Group, Paul collaborates with tech service providers, emphasizing the advantages of compliance both for the operations and for the protection of the client's critical data. A recognized speaker and thought leader, Paul enlightens MSPs, medical professionals, and technology service providers about the significance of compliance and methods to protect their business and reputations. We are so grateful to have him on, but first, let's check in with Chris and Rex.
Hey, Bessie.
Hello.
Howdy.
We are having fun from Minneapolis, Minnesota, hosting another peer group accountability meeting. So on the road again, a lot of fun. Rex, how are things up in your part of the world?
I am happy to be back in my chair. I was at Momentum last week, which paired with having all the salespeople in for our quarterly meeting, and that collision with the salespeople being in town and a bunch of partners being in town and getting them together. I don't think anybody was expecting just how cool it was for so many of our partners to get to talk to their CAMs. So that definitely was an exciting part of Momentum, and the feedback was awesome. So, but I am happy to be back in my home chair.
Since we all three of us travel so much, we wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about some cybersecurity awareness tips related to travel. So I think we have a graphic. If we could bring that up, that would be great. So a few cybersecurity tips when traveling. The first one is do not use public Wi-Fi when you're accessing confidential information. It's better to use your personal hotspot instead in those scenarios. The next tip is
or be on a
your
VPN,
devices
right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Or be on a VPN. That's another good one. We got to add that one in there. Want to make sure you're keeping devices secure and accounted for at all times. So a big thing is don't walk away from your devices. I know Matt Lee is doing a campaign of lock it up. Like, don't leave your computer unlocked and walk away from it, especially when you're traveling, because you might take a picture of it.
That's good advice anywhere you are. And I'll tell you what, I was in the Pax8 office the other day, and I got up from my computer, walked about 15 feet to talk to Craig Donovan, our boss. And when I came back, Dom Kirby had found my computer, and I think I got it back to normal. But
you never know what's going to happen. So at Pax8, it's all fun and games. But if you're out in the real world, someone could be a threat actor. We don't know. So better to be safe than sorry.
The stakes are a little higher when you don't know. I mean, the stakes are high at the Pax8 office, and you get somebody that messes with you. But out in public, out in the real world, the stakes are very high when you leave your equipment unattended.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, in the Pax8 office, you leave it unattended, it is fair game. So,
absolutely, lesson learned.
Let's see, and we have a few additional things on here. Let's just mention those. We've got disable automatic Bluetooth pairing. Don't allow your devices to auto join unfamiliar Wi-Fi networks. And don't use borrowed chargers or public charging stations. Any other
What
tips
are,
to add here, Rex, you think?
Oh my goodness. I think we put everything we could think of in that list. um, no, just keep your eye
What were
out
you
for
going to
Dom.
say, Chris?
Well, one of my favorite devices that I got, I think at a trade show from a vendor or through, was one of the USB security devices that allowed you to connect to USB chargers, but it blocked any data throughput. And I think that's one of my favorite things that I always travel with. So if I do need to plug in or charge, especially if I can't use an outlet and I need to find a USB charging plug, I use one of those little, like I said, you can find them online and buy it, but it's a great little investment. Just a USB adapter that will prevent, data flowing through it. So if you plug into, an unsuspecting charger, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, um, to kind of prevent some of the nefarious activities there. That's one of my favorite devices that I take with me.
Oh, what
So,
about scanning QR codes? What do we think about scanning QR codes?
yeah.
I'm,
And it's funny how that's just a great example of just being out the awareness, right? And it is so easy and convenient. And I think about the world we're in. It's almost unfortunate that QR codes have such a great potential to be a time saver, easy, but being aware of really what you're scanning and where and when and why and who's behind it. Yeah, awareness is the bottom line for me.
I mean, while I was at Momentum, I watched somebody go into the LinkedIn app and do the share contact, and the QR code came up. And I looked at her and I said, "You really want me to scan a QR code at a security conference?"
Exactly. Well,
yeah,
speaking of
I think
security,
it's.
mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I
Go
think
ahead,
it's time.
Chris.
Yeah, speaking of security and compliance and those kind of things, Rex, let's bring on our guest. Let's bring on Paul.
What's
Hey
going on,
guys,
Paul? Welcome to
Hey,
the
Paul, how
show.
you doing today?
So
Where are you
this is the
traveling?
time where we ask you to do a humble brag. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you got into the business, and just maybe a little bit more about the Compliancy Group.
absolutely. Well, first of all, guys, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. This is my first Academy Live. I was super excited when you guys invited me. As I'm sure I know Rex and Chris. I know you guys well enough. You'll be surprised to find out I am actually at my house today. It is a weekday, and I am in Memphis, where I actually live.
That
That's
seems so
probably the
odd.
one time. Right, I know. This may be the only time I've ever been on a call with you from my house. Um, so it's funny. I was listening to those traveling tips, and I was thinking about that a lot. We were talking before the show. I travel like 40 plus 45 weeks a year or something like that. And I'll add one more that you guys I feel like might have missed:
Mhm.
privacy screen on your cell phone. This is the
There you go.
greatest thing ever. I don't know how many times I have caught somebody like sneaking a little peek at my text messages before I switched over to the privacy screen on the cell phone. But I am a huge believer in that.
Great idea. I'm glad you added that, Paul. And sometimes it's just maybe not ill intent, but just how convenient it is. You kind of catch something out of the corner of your eye and look a little longer than you need to, right? Or somebody
Same thing on
trying
the
to capture
laptop
something.
screen on the plane. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I've got one on my Surface too. I've got a privacy screen on the Surface for the same reason. Although I have to admit, even as much as I travel, I am useless when I fly. Like, don't ask me to work on spreadsheets. It's like Pavlov's dog. When I sit down on a plane, I fall asleep almost immediately. I'm
Nice.
incapable of really, functional on an airplane. But in answer to who I am, I've known you guys a while. I'm a former MSP. That's really how I got here. I think my mentality and my thought process has pretty much held that service provider mentality. Today, I am vice president of channel at Compliancy Group. We're the industry leader for simplified compliance for healthcare. So on the healthcare side, if you haven't seen the words Compliancy Group and you work in healthcare at all, you've probably run into us because we're endorsed by major medical associations and other groups. We're kind of the industry standard for the way the healthcare community works and views simplified healthcare compliance. We started out purely in HIPAA, but have truly expanded over the last couple of years into call it a uniform solution for compliance for healthcare. As a matter of fact, this week I'll throw out a shameless plug. We have a massive product overhaul and a big product release that's come out after months and months and months of hard work. So we're very proud.
That's
Yep.
yeah. I could say I can neither confirm nor deny rumors that we may have heard or may have talked about before. So very excited to see all the changes that Compliancy Group is coming out with, new opportunities you're creating. Really appreciate that. Now, Paul, one of the things we do on the show every week is we bring up a quote. So I'd love to, Willis, if you don't mind putting that up on the screen. Paul, I'd like to ask you to read the quote for us and tell us why this is significant for you.
Well, I'll say in the beginning, anybody that knows me, I'm kind of a cynical person. I've been in compliance and security most of my life, right? So I like this quote because I think it's absolutely accurate. The only secure computer is one that's unplugged, locked in a safe, and buried 20 feet under the ground in a secret location. And I'm not even sure about that one. Right. I like it because Mr. Hughes here really, it's the way I think about it. If it's connected to the internet, if you can get to it in any way, if I can get in the room with it, it's not safe by definition, right?
Mm-hmm. Nothing is impervious.
Well, and I mean, one of the things I think that's important to call out is that, Pax8, for example, you guys have an incredible variety of security tools on your platform, right? And all of them function critically to protect the data to MSPs, their clients, everybody downstream is looking to protect. But no technology is perfect, and human beings form, like layer 8. And that part of it is extremely difficult to secure. So I think that no matter what tools we put in place, no matter how much money we throw at cybersecurity, inevitably it's not if something's going to happen, it's when, right? So I hate to say that you can't buy your way out of this, but ultimately I think it's true that nothing is truly secure, and you have to have a plan for contingencies.
And you might say, you call it a cynic. Some might call it a realist. Rex, is that what you'd call them?
Yeah, and you mentioned human beings, and it reminded me of something I don't think I've talked about on the show. But the first time I went skydiving, there was this contract, and I remember there was a line in there that said, "I acknowledge that the equipment is made by human beings, and humans are prone to error, and the equipment might malfunction." And not only did I have to initial it, but I had to rewrite those words in my own handwriting in a space on the contract. And I thought that was pretty wild, right? Like acknowledging that humans are prone to error. And then I handed in the paperwork, and then they turned on the video camera and made me read that paragraph to the camera before they let me put on the gear and go get on the plane.
Well, that's reassuring.
Yeah, that rings it home. Jeez.
Had you explored other skydiving providers in the area prior to this? Did you do any kind of historical analysis? There might be more to that story.
Were you the only one in the group that had to do that?
The short story is my daughter told me that's what she wanted to do for her high school graduation present. And I was like, yeah, sure. If you do it, I'll do it. 100% convinced I was never going skydiving. And then 75-year-old grandma says, oh, I want to do it. So next thing I know, we're at the skydiving place with grandma. So I couldn't really back out.
Perfectly good airplane. Hey, Paul, I want to. We have an article. I think we have something to pull up on that. Would you mind talking about this? To me, this is kind of a big deal. Do you mind talking about this and talking about some of your speaking engagements?
Well, this one, you would think I was very happy to win best presentation. I think this was like a best breakout session in CRN Exchange for this. I do wish they got a better picture of me though. It's not my favorite shot. I'm gonna throw that out there in the front end. Um, this was a fun session. You know, if you guys, anybody out there that knows me at all, I come at this from a kind of a blue collar, you know, I was a worker first. I was out there in the fields hanging access points and throwing in Fortinet, you know, 15, 18 years ago. So needless to say, I'm not the most polished presenter. I think maybe sometimes to a good extent. That particular presentation was actually who gives a, and I'll let you fill in the blanks about compliance there. We took a whole different approach to it to be much more direct and throw it out there like, why the hell is everybody talking about this? You got into IT and cybersecurity, and now it seems like at every single convention, compliance is more of a common topic than just about anything else. So that was a fun one. We got to really break into it and talk to a lot of partners about how compliance actually affects what they do and where the lines are drawn for them. I think universally, one of the things we run into the most the first time we talk to new MSP partners is I don't really think they understand the liability and risk to their own organization that they're taking on when they're signing the business associate agreement, when they're working with these healthcare organizations or with a factory, you know, that's got CMMC or whatever. I don't think that all service providers really understand the bleed over of the client's risk into your environment. And so that was a fun session where we really got to break that out and talk about it, you know, give specific examples from my own past in my career about ways that I found myself in possession of EPHI as a service provider, you know, those kind of things. And of course, that was also a great event. I think one of you guys was there.
Well, I think, you know, what you said, something you said earlier, I kind of want to transition the conversation a little bit because you talked about the tools. You brought up how Pax8 on the line card has a number of, you know, security tools, but there's a difference between, you know, security and compliance. And I'd love to kind of give you the opportunity to kind of lean into that and kind of tell it what do you mean when you say there's a difference between compliance and security? We say a lot of those things in almost synonymous. Like we use those terms, you know, but there's a very big distinction between compliance and security. They do not equal each other. Tell us a little bit about your perspective on the differences and how they do go together, but what's distinct about those terms?
It's a great question. And actually, that is something that probably I've spent most of my career on this vendor side of the table, at least, trying to help people get their heads around this. So security is a function of compliance. One of the MSPs at a conference I was at not too long ago asked me, okay, man, so what's more important, you know, compliance or security if they're different? It's kind of like asking me what's more important, my foundation or my house. The foundation of a compliance program is security to a large extent, but it's not doors and walls and windows because compliance is a business problem. Security is an issue of risk management, right? And that risk is focused within aspects of the business. I like to explain compliance as a tax ID problem. It starts at the very top and it spreads all the way out throughout the entire organization. You as an organization are required to comply with a law or federal standard, whatever that is. And the result, if you don't, is fines or sanctions against the organization. Security, as a function of compliance, is specifically designed to protect the data, the systems, in many cases, the people themselves inside of it. And therefore, many times, or not always, but many times, security is what either was neglected or fell down that created the compliance breach. Okay, so make it make more sense. Let's leave healthcare and all of that. Let's talk about two companies everybody knows, Nike and Boeing. Okay. Both publicly traded, you know, Fortune 100s. They have all the GLBA and SOX compliance requirements behind them. Technically speaking, they have the same compliance requirements in many cases, apples to apples. The difference is Nike makes tennis shoes and Boeing makes missiles. So Nike naturally gets to run out of money for security as a component of their compliance before Boeing, because quite frankly, the federal government doesn't care about the design for the new Jordans, but they care a lot about the design for the new missiles. This same example reverberates all the way across every regulated industry. So let's go to HIPAA now. HIPAA is written for a single person chiropractor and Kaiser Permanente equally. And there's a HIPAA security rule that lays out these very gray security standards that both of these organizations have to comply with. But the problem is a single person chiropractor and Kaiser don't have the same risk profile. That's where managed service providers, IT providers, MSSPs, security consultants, that's where they're supposed to become involved. A security consultant or provider is supposed to help the organization understand their risk, what's effective and reasonable, and implement that into the compliance program. So, to repeat it, security is a component of compliance, but a compliance program goes way beyond just the security piece.
And Rex, I think about your security background. How much did compliance come up at the time when you were really focused in your role of improving your company's security posture?
Well, it's interesting because back then the compliance, the regulations were getting created, and I'd love to get your take on this, Paul, but we'd go talk to some medical about their compliance requirements, and they're like, that doesn't have any teeth, or I'm too small, they're not going to care. And then, then some events started happening. The regulators got involved, and next thing you know, they're starting to care more about compliance, and the fact that we were designing some of our security offerings to more help them be compliant with the policies that they were writing, we get a little bit more traction. And what's your take on where the teeth is in these Sarbanes-Oxley or Graham-Leach or HIPAA, or outside of the United States? There's other standards out there and regulatory bodies. What's your take? Is there an appetite to want to be compliant?
I think the short answer is yes. Across the board, we're seeing more enforcement of the existing regulations. Like you said, HIPAA is a very old act, and really until the last 4 or 5, 6 years, enforcement into the small business community was pretty light. You look at other sectors, it kind of follows in the similar path. One of the things that's changing, though, is the involvement of the private sector in these compliance issues. So, class action lawsuits are starting to become the norm when you have a major breach. We've had several recently. I'll pull up one right now. I was thinking about today. McLaren Health is the example I would give right now. These guys they're facing a class action lawsuit because they have been found out of compliance with HIPAA. What's funny about that is I can't sue you for violating HIPAA. Okay, I can't sue you for violating a law. What I can sue you for, and what's happening, is breach of implied contract and negligence. You see, when I gave you my medical records, and this goes to the small doctor all the way up to these big health groups, okay? When I am giving you my medical records and I fill out that little privacy form at the doctor's office that says you can tell my spouse or you can't, how you can share this information, that's a contract between me and the provider I'm sharing that data with. And what's happening now is when that provider has a breach and they're found to be negligent, they're found to be in violation of the law, the core tenet that they were supposed to follow, you get a big law firm, or in the case of these McLaren folks, 3 or 4 different law firms, and they all come together and they start to build out class action lawsuits against them. So, Rex, one of the challenges when you talk about the old days is that compliance moves very slow, even when there's a breach or an audit. A HIPAA audit can literally take years. We defend clients and work with clients under audit all the time. It can take 2 or 3, even more years to get through this process. These class action lawsuits are being settled fast and to the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars. If you think about it, I like to use analogies a lot. What really got asbestos out of all the buildings and schools and hospitals and homes, right? It's not federal action that did it. It's mesothelioma ads. It's class action lawsuits against people that left that in their building. And we're starting to see that private sector move into it. And then the other piece is you're about to see states attorney generals getting involved. So in New York, for example, a law firm is being hit by the state's attorney general because they lost 280,000 New Yorkers' medical records that were breached during what otherwise would simply be a violation of HIPAA. So I think what we're going to see is increased federal regulation, but actually much more active private and local sector enforcement.
And I think that it's actually the insurance companies that have to pay when these lawsuits are lost that are now ratcheting up their requirements that's really going to drive the action, right? Because if you want to get
Oh,
the
I'll do you one
insurance,
better.
you have to show
Sorry,
compliance,
yeah.
right?
Well, yes, and not a yes, but a yes, and. So, perfect example of this, and I want to say it's San Diego Health, is actually one of these lawsuits that's going on right now. They're also being sued by their insurance company because when they filled out the forms that you're talking about and the applications to get these policies, it asks, are you in compliance with all laws and regulations around the data that you hold? Well, you weren't. And you had a breach, and then you were found negligent and found in breach of the HIPAA law, right? So, guess what? That insurance company shouldn't be defending you. All the legal fees that they've pumped out in trying to protect you through this, all that, none of that should have happened. Your policy is null and void, and they want their money back. You're actually starting to see insurance companies sue their own clients because we defended you, found out you weren't compliant, and now we would like damages and all of our money back. So not only do you not have the coverage that you've been paying for, but however much they came out of pocket, you now have a new plaintiff coming back after you. It's truly it's getting nasty out there. I recently filled out the form. I kind of have a little bit of a dual role. I work in cybersecurity in our own organization, and we just completed our own cyber liability insurance policy, right? So we're looking for a new one. I just completed the application. Man, these questions are getting intense. When you get to the place where you're a SaaS company, what they're asking about what we're doing, how we're protecting it is night and day from what we saw, even 2 years ago. So yeah, the requirements from insurance are going up and up and up. It's getting more difficult to get a policy, and they're preparing themselves to drop and even potentially sue you if they can wiggle their way out because you weren't compliant or you lied.
So, is anybody selling insurance to protect you from your insurance company?
That's right. I mean, that's about right.
Oh, the world we
Paul,
live in.
yeah, Paul, I guess when coming from MSP space, there's tons of changes and fast. What would when you talk to MSPs, what are some of the top things you say? These are the changes. These are the priorities in your world right now from your lens.
I think having the tough conversation with clients that have been historically difficult to get into a security posture that's acceptable and protects them is the responsibility of these service providers today. MSPs for a long time, and I know I was guilty of this myself back in the day. It is difficult to acquire clients in many cases, and client loyalty is extremely important to you. It costs a lot less to maintain your book of work that you've built over the years and keep those relationships tight than it does to go out and find new business. So one of the things I think that a lot of service providers end up doing is they avoid the tough conversations with existing customers, for the I don't want to rock the boat mentality, and you're not doing them or yourself a service when you do this. The customer ultimately, and this is true of the small business, and in many cases all the way up into the mid-market and the guys that are co-managed, they really don't understand the stakes. When you work in your own small medical group, your little factory, your car dealership, whatever that is, you're truly working in a microcosm of the industry you're in. So you only see the things that you personally experience. You only fix the bugs and the vulnerabilities and all those things that you personally run into. And therefore, until you're the one in the box and the breach happens to you, you really don't understand the stakes. MSPs can't say that. I mean, look at us, guys. We spend hours upon hours upon hours every month, all of us individually trying to educate the community and talk to the community about the risk that they and their clients downstream face. So, if there's one thing that I think truly has to change in the MSP world, there's really two. One, you have to have the tough conversation with your clients about their security. And two, you've got to turn that lens around. So many providers are not using all the tools internally that they're selling. They're not building the same posture inside their organizations that they're promoting outside, because you purchase based on the need to sell and you focus your energy and efforts based on the need to deploy and maintain client environments. But you are a risk to your customer the same way your customer is a risk to you. So I think having that really hard conversation outside and then turning right back around and focusing that lens on yourself, that's where we have to be, in 2023 going into 24. It's time to take this stuff seriously, or realize that, this industry is going to end up being federally regulated and controlled, because these providers won't take up the arms themselves and do it. Something has to change, right? I mean, we're not doing well in the cyber wars.
I don't know if it's possible to do well in the cyber wars. Every time we get better, the dark side gets better. But
The dark
I'm going to
side
go ahead
pays
and
better.
yield. Yeah, that's probably true. I'm going to go ahead and yield my time to Bessie. So if we want to bring her in to keep this conversation going.
Yeah. Hey, Bessie.
Hi there.
So,
Hello.
so Paul, one of the things within, in Pax8 Academy, through the peer groups and the instructor-led courses that we provide to partners, security is obviously a big topic that comes up a lot. And one of the things, Bessie, I kind of wanted to start kind of asking you, what are some of the things that you are hearing from partners, or questions or concerns that we can kind of throw in front of Paul? What have you experienced?
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of questions all the time. I often work with some of our smaller clients, or our smaller MSPs who are maybe just getting started. And a big question they're always asking us is, what do you recommend? How can I get people to, like, SMBs, to care about cybersecurity? How can I get them to understand the importance that they're at risk? And what, I guess, starting right there, what would you recommend from that perspective?
Well, first of all, stop telling them about the tools that you use and what they do. They don't
Oh,
care and
that's
they
a good
don't
one.
understand. EDR,
Yeah.
MDR, SOC, SASE, CASB, we all speak alphabet soup. When you do this to the end customer, you sound like Charlie Brown's teacher selling nerd crap. Wah 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 wah, acronym, right? It's not well received. You're neither scaring them nor educating them. When you get into that stuff, you're confusing them, and confused people don't
Mm,
make decisions. They shut down. So one of the things you have
yeah.
to remember is that they are hiring you as an MSP or a technology service provider because they're not technologists and they don't speak this language. When you go to the doctor, they speak Latin. You speak nerd. There is a language barrier between these two things. And the way to break that is to talk to them like a human being, right? Sit down with them and explain, listen, there is a new world of threats. These have gone beyond the antivirus, worm driven things. They've now expanded into your social media life, into when you answer the phones, into the text messages you receive, into every system and every aspect of your life. There are bad people trying to do bad things to people just like you. I have solutions for it. It's a stack, it's a set, right? Like, there's a bunch of pieces to this puzzle. Let me tell you the end result. What I'm going to do is protect your people, your systems, your software, your cloud assets, and overall your business. And this is what it's going to cost. And these are the actions I'm going to take to make that happen. They don't care about what. Give them actions and deliverables. This is the problem that you have. This is what I'm going to do. And the result is, this is how I'm going to protect you. If you cut out a lot of the tech jargon around it, these people are entrepreneurs themselves, especially when you talk about small medical. I mean, a lot of these folks got out of college, did their got their medical license, spent all this year in school, and they started their own business. And at the end of the day, they brought you in as the nerd that's going to keep them safe when they go to bed tonight and know nothing bad's going to happen to their computers. If you can talk to them about not the computers or the individual tech, but the business as a whole, and show them the benefit to subscribing to your services and your solutions so that they can have that peace of mind, I think it goes a long way. And then the other thing I'll add, a splash of analogy. Come up with something that makes sense. I made a career out of talking about, building houses. You want to keep out more than just, I did it a minute ago. When you talk about the foundation, yeah, but like the foundation protects against snakes and the stuff that crawls. What about rains and bugs and all the other things that get into your house? When you turn it into an analogy and talk to people at a real level, they're much more willing to hear you. And if I'm going to add anything else, quit trying to scare the living hell out of everybody in every single conversation. Give them some benefit to it. Look, it's a scary world out there. But if we do this, this is how I can help you grow and stabilize, right? Those are the three things. It's not that complicated. We're just going at it the wrong way because we think they want to hear a bunch of nerd stuff.
I think that's so relevant. Like alphabet soup. I love you said that. That's kind of what they hear. And I think that a lot of MSPs think they are doing the right thing by talking the technology, right? The bits, the bytes, the features, and I think we have to speak in a business language. I love the term buzzword compatible. I always joke about people being buzzword compatible. We can use all our TLAs and the terminology. That's not what's important. It's what's relevant, right, to our clients, to the customers, the people that we're serving. And I'd love to see if I can put you on the spot, and not because I want to put you on the spot, Paul, because I know you're like a cat. You'll always land on your feet with this, man. You're good at that. You're adept. But when we talk about telling stories and analogies, I remember hearing you speak probably years ago about the house, like you just repeated it. I love the way you presented that because it was so relevant. Oh, I don't need this. Oh, okay. So you want me to take off the front door so anyone can walk in, or do you want me to take off the roof and let the rain in? Or, not put in a foundation, let the ants come in. To me, that was relevant because people could get it. So I would love to have you, what kind of stories can you come up with that maybe some of our partners can latch on to help with those conversations of making something relevant to who they are serving? Could you maybe give a couple of suggestions or ideas on real world things, or help our partners connect with the story idea?
So I think everybody's got to make it their own, right? And you want to come up with something that's relevant to you, that speaks to your own personal experience. And my experience when I came up with that story was that, when I started my business, so you know what I'll do? I'll expand on what you just said. I'll lay it out that way and explain what that story really is. The story is that when I started, I was doing bronze, silver, gold, platinum, whatever, right? And I would build my solutions based on price point. So in bronze, you got a little bit of stuff, and in platinum, you got like all the stuff, right? And so when I went in to talk to a customer, I was trying to convince them to get into that platinum. First of all, nobody wants to buy the most expensive thing, and nobody wants not. You don't really want the customer that only wants the cheapest thing, right? So what did I sell? Dude, I sold a ton of silver, right? Everybody's in silver, smattering of gold, very little bronze, whole bunch of silver. What I started to realize, and it really occurred to me when we did some home renovations, and I looked at the proposal that the guy handed me, and it was just for a kitchen, basically, right? Like kitchen sink. This is what the floors are going to cost. He didn't tell me how many nails or how many boards or the cost of the glue or the cost. Like if it wasn't a countertop that was a physical thing that you're adding in, I didn't see any of that stuff. And it occurred to me, what I was allowing my customer to do was, like, I'm the builder and I'm trying to build you this house, but every time something costs anything, I expose the customer to the individual price, and they go, well, I don't want to pay for that. So here, not that board. Those nails are too expensive. I don't know what you mean with the caulking stuff, but I don't think the bathroom needs that. What you end up with is holes in the walls and the floor and the ceiling, because every time you remove something that I was trying to put in there, you you stop my ability to build in that area. You're stopping me from being functional. So, I try to use those analogies, look in my life and say, what makes sense to me? Can I translate it to people? And the other thing is, let's do a real story. Use something you see every day. I got one for you. So today, I had to replace my AirPods. So I went to Best Buy this morning. I went to take a break. I went over to Best Buy. The guy in front of me is like my dad's age, late 60s, early 70s. He has a fresh stack of $100 bills, and he has 3 Apple gift cards. He's trying to get Best Buy to sell him 3 $500 Apple gift cards. Best Buy doesn't want to sell him 3 $500 Apple gift cards. You'd think they would, right? But they know what's going on. This is a white-haired guy with a stack of hundreds straight from the ATM across the street. Somebody is scamming this dude. Somebody is taking this guy for a ride. So they pull out the material and they set it down in front of him, and it's this giant sheet. It's like this big thing from Best Buy. There's all this writing on it. And they're like, I need you to acknowledge that none of this is happening before we can sell this to you. And they hand him this. The guy doesn't read it. He doesn't listen. He insists that they're holding him up. This is super important. He's kind of rude about it, to be honest with you. And he takes all his stuff and he runs out the door. They only sold him one, and he goes to Target to get another. What I just told you is why you're supposed to pay for cybersecurity training for your employees, because nobody's helping that guy. That guy had a sense of urgency that was put onto him from somebody with an outside, in whatever the influence is, whether he's being extorted, whether he's being lied to, he thinks his kid's in jail somewhere, the IRS is going to take his house, whatever that is, there's something that's been applied to this guy. And because he has no idea how to protect himself and nobody's training or teaching him, he is at extreme risk, and he's now a victim. I didn't have to explain to you that we're going to do monthly training videos and we're going to incorporate social media and phishing and all that. Listen to me, man. I saw a guy that looks just like you today, doctor. He's spelling out $1,500 of hard-earned money. How easy do you think that would be to do to your admin, your secretary, your assistant, right? All of a sudden, they're like, oh, God, wait, what? He's doing that at Best Buy, and it clicks. Use stories from real life. Don't worry about like I said, ignore the tools, work on the results. Somebody needs to help that person. Don't let that be you.
Good.
I love that. It's such a good example, because you can picture also that happening, and it takes it from being, don't click on a fish, to this is
Right.
what might actually happen to one of your employees. So I really
Right.
appreciate
Did
that.
he click on a phishing email? Maybe not. Very, very likely this is a text message, a phone call. I mean, there's so many different ways that poor person can have been exploited, right? But by the time he got to Best Buy, it was too late for him. And by the time your admin is sitting there staring at the wire transfer and they're on the bank website, it's too late to go back and fix this.
Yep. So switching gears again, let's talk about the rise of lawsuits. You talked a lot of the changes and things like that. I think tell us a little bit about what you're seeing. You're saying insurance companies suing clients, but what other things are you seeing in the industry where litigation is coming into play?
Well, so I talked a little bit about the what is it, McLaren lawsuit that's happening right now. San Diego Health is being sued. There's a number of them. These are happening all over the country, and what's really taken place is just that a few law firms suddenly realize, like I said earlier, no, I can't sue you for violating the law. But look at the implied contract. When you told these people that you're the people that are qualified to work with them and qualified to protect their data, there's this contract that's gone out between them. One of the things that MSPs, vendors alike, a lot of this sector does, are these hold harmless things, right? So you put in your contract that no matter what happens, they're going to hold you harmless. If those clauses actually worked to protect you, you wouldn't need the cyber liability insurance policies that you try to get, right? The end of the day, you are saying, I am the person who is qualified to do this. Here, give me your data, let me protect it. And people are rightfully angry when you weren't doing your job. That's just going to increase. Another thing that's happening, and let's talk about this one for a second. So there has been for a long time a law called the False Claims Act. When I was an MSP, my client base were very heavy Department of Defense manufacturing, like DoD supply chain, and healthcare. Those are really the two sectors I worked in, right? And if you had asked me back then to talk about the False Claims Act, my conversation would have been 100% focused on the DoD side. It was always enforced in the DFARS world. It was always enforced over there because what the law says, and I'm not an attorney, so we're going to do the Paul Redding quick version of this. What it says is the federal government gives companies money for a lot of different reasons. And when you get money from the federal government, there's always some stipulation. Most of the times, those stipulations include functional things you have to do. Okay. So if you're in DoD manufacturing and the federal government pays to help build your tank factory, they asked if you're in compliance with DFARS and DIBCAP and FedRAMP and all these other CMMC, all these things. And you said yes, and you took their money. And forever in that sector, if it was later proven that you were lying to get that money under the False Claims Act, they can come back, take all their money with an up to 3x multiplier in penalty, and whoever ratted you out gets 20%. So your employee that works in IT that brought that multi-factor authentication upgrade for all the systems and it was going to cost 20 grand, and you said no, and then you made them go in there and you filled out a form for the government that says you've got MFA on everything, that employee can turn whistleblower, turn you in and get 20% of 3x all your federal funds. It's a ton of money. That's now being applied to healthcare and a lot of other sectors that the federal government's been subsidizing for a long time. So let's do healthcare. Macro MIPS, meaningful use. They incentivized all these medical professionals to move to electronic health records, to move to the EMRs and the EHRs, to migrate from paper to digital. If you did it and you turned in your little risk assessment every year, which you had to do in order to keep these funds and this revenue, if you did that, then they would give you these rebates and pay you, essentially, right? You took in federal funds for this. And at the same time, you're taking in Medicare because you also say you are eligible for it as a compliant provider. Now, if I can prove that the doctor that I work for lied on their risk assessment to get those federal funds, the exact same thing is eligible. The doctor can get criminal. By the way, this is criminal and civil penalties. And it is the person who signed off on the risk assessment and who signed the application to get those federal funds. So that can be the doctor, but that can also be your practice manager or just some low-level employee that got stuck doing this, right? So what can happen is an employee can go, you know what? We don't have multi-factor authentication on everything. We don't do vulnerability scans. Matter of fact, we don't do any of this. They can go, they can whistleblow, they can get paid out of your penalties and your paying. And what do we all know about whistleblowers? They are then impossible to fire. Not only did they get paid for ratting you out and they took your money, but now they are your most impossible to touch employee because anything you do to them is going to be viewed as retaliatory. So you have somebody sitting there day in and day out that you know basically burned the building down and got a big fat stack of cash for it, and you feel victimized. But check it out. You lied. You didn't do the thing that you told the federal government you were doing, right? You said, what did you say earlier, Chris? Well, it's not going to happen to me. What did Rex say? All my small businesses said, well, no, what are the odds that I'm going to get audited? I say this a lot of times when I speak at direct medical stuff, like I just did a Kentucky Optometric Association event. And I said, okay, who here believes the HIPAA police are going to come get them this year? Not a single hand goes up. So who here believes that bloodthirsty lawyers will take any opportunity to take money away from you? Every hand in the room, right there immediately, right? Everybody's like, wait, who here believes that Sally at the front desk for $20,000 or $30,000 would rat you out in a heartbeat? Every hand in the room, right? Everyone's got somebody somewhere in the organization that would take that paycheck.
Wow, yeah, that is that's a really great analogy to see too of thinking through because you only think, oh, HIPAA and it's out there and I'm not really thinking about it, but I think that makes it a lot easier to see like, oh, I might actually get audited. Is it possible to get audited even if you don't have a whistleblower? Is that something that's regularly happening too?
So I get that question a lot. You know, what causes an audit, especially in healthcare, right? It's kind of a cart horse thing, right? So yes, there are random HIPAA audits. No, you are probably never going to have one happen to you or your client. Truly random. I think of all the MSPs, hundreds of them we work with, I have one MSP that I'm positive has not one, but two clients that have been HIPAA audited. And One of them was random for sure, like absolutely. And the other one was basically random, like they didn't do anything necessarily wrong. It's the only instance I've ever seen of truly random one in the folks that I work with immediately. What we see all the time, and folks, we are engaged in 2 to 3 audits that we're helping our clients defend themselves against at any given moment. It's happening every day. What we see a lot of is you have a breach or an incident. You have to report it. One of the worst things you can do is not understand your reporting requirements when it comes to the regulations that you're under, be that HIPAA or CMMC, whatever that is. You have to understand how you report, who you report to, and when you report. When you report an incident, and let's stay in HIPAA land, there will be an investigation. There's no option for this to get turned in and then go, stuff happens, get back to your life, right? They're going to investigate. And an investigation starts as a big data request. So essentially what happens is you turn in a report and says, I got breached, and they say, great, here, in very short order, just a few days, I need you to answer all these questions. And they kick you a ton of questions, and many of them are like, give me your policy for privacy, your administrative control policy, give me your security policy, I'd like to see your high-tech Subtitle D breach notification policies, right? So all of those things are documents that they're looking for. Based on your answer is generally how the audits start happening, because you don't have the ability to deliver what they want. They're looking for, and I don't have a visual aid for it, I probably should have brought it. There are 7 fundamental elements to a compliance program. This is from the Office of Inspector General, OIG. So OIG established federally what a compliance program means. And those 7 fundamental elements are things like establish secure lines of communication. They're not, encrypt your computers. There's 7 organizational things that you're supposed to have assessments, policies, and procedures against. And so when they ask for the data, that's what they're asking for, is a proof that you have a complete compliance program in place. Because you can't immediately illustrate that, or because your answer is lacking in what you were doing, then an audit commences. And an audit, again, becomes this huge data pool. So the way to explain all of this, your auditors are lawyers. The person that wrote the law was a lawyer. It's HIPAA, for example, is 700 pages of legalese written by attorneys meant to be audited and investigated by other attorneys. It's very hard for an organization that's purely technical, like an MSP, or worse, purely medical, like some doctor out here, to be able to illustrate the right data when they're requested. So what happens? They ask the question, you tell them what happened, they ask your question back, your answer is inadequate, they audit and ultimately fine and penalize you. That's usually how it goes. So incident or breach, reporting, poor answer, audit rolls out.
So I have a question for you, Paul. So talk about, managing risk and things like that, but talk about like the impact, and especially as things change, what we're seeing as far as actual audits, actual penalties. What's the cost of doing nothing? Is that going up, and what does that look like?
Well, the cost of doing nothing can be your business. It can be everything. It can be business ending. And for a long time, especially in stuff like HIPAA, the fines and penalties really did look business ending. And so I think almost it was detrimental to getting people to take action. I can't tell you how many times I've had a small doctor look at me and go, Paul, if I get a $2.5 million fine, I'm just going to pack up, declare bankruptcy, and start over in another life. I would never be able to pay that. So I'm not going to invest in anything. If it happens to me, so be it. The penalties are actually becoming more frequent with lower actual fine values, and they're penalties that people are expected and anticipate paying. So for example, we're starting to see a lot of stuff, you've heard of business associate agreements, right? If there's a vendor help working in healthcare, the doctor has to have this contract with the vendor. It's called a BAA. Now, a lot of times what you'll see is before the audit even commences, they're going to get a list of your vendors and hit you for $31,000 per vendor that you don't have the business associate agreement in place with. They don't have to find you guilty of whatever happened. There's no $2.5 million penalty. That'll come later, maybe, right? Conceivably, maybe not. But on the front end, because of lack of the contracts that you have to have in place, they start hitting you with these $31,000 fines. Another thing in healthcare right now, the most common fine issued is actually a fine because it takes you, it's called patient right to access. It takes you too long to get me my data, or you want to charge too much to give it to me. I asked for my medical records. You can't provide them in 30 days, and therefore I get to hit you, and they're going to come after you. And we've seen instances where the fines were like 5 and 8 fines issued within 1 week, right? We had 5 fines issued in 1 day, which has never happened before in the history of healthcare, right? And they were all for patient right to access. As a matter of fact, HHS has publicly stated that this patient right to access thing is one of the most critical issues that they're going after, and that these are where the fines are going to come from. So let's go back to taking action. You have, 30 days to get me my medical records. Yeah, my building burned down. My backups were on this like hard drive that I take home. I can't really restore from it. Apparently it's like 6 terabytes. I don't know what that means. It's going to take 4 months for me to get this back. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. And it's not just because you said you had backups. That's fine. Hey, look, a hard drive's backups, right? You can't get me my records within a window of time. And therefore, you're going to be hit for patient right to access violations. These are functional things. And so I think that people underestimate that it's either nothing happens or this business ending catastrophe that, I'm essentially dead as a corporation anyway. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The federal, state, and local governments, attorneys, everybody are starting to move into a much more practical, you're gonna pay, it's gonna hurt, and then you're gonna go back to business. So, maybe no country club membership and your kids going to community college instead of Ivy League, but you're still in business and we need our money.
Excellent. Paul, do you have anything else that we're getting close to the end of the hour here? So is there anything else you wanted to tell us, or anything you want to leave our audience with before we say goodbye?
This has been great, and I always enjoy doing stuff like this. I love this community. I think that the MSP and the ITSP provider, world is really essential for protecting this country and society as a whole. The stuff that we have, our data is truly become your life, right? And so I would just encourage everybody out there to realize this isn't just a money grab when you go out there and you're trying to upgrade your clients into a security stack. You're trying to add compliance as a service in there. This isn't just a way for you to make money. Don't get me wrong. You should. Compliant and secure services should cost more, and there's a reason that they do. But this is a matter of delivering the promise that you've made to your client. They brought you in the room to keep them safe. The same reason when you go to a doctor, you don't actually expect them to explain exactly how the procedure works. You expect them to keep you alive on the operating table and bring you through on the other side with the expected results, right? View that as what's important to your client. Realize that when you go out there and you take on these people, your responsibility is to protect them, and value your own business. They have an obligation and a responsibility to take your advice, to do the right thing, and ultimately protect you back. It is a two-way street, and not every client is a good client, and the ones that won't let you secure them are not the people that are going to take you to this next level.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today. And we'll hope to have you on another time. Before then,
Betsy, hold on. Before you go,
yeah.
Paul, how does Compliancy Group really effectively impact our partners?
Thanks. So what Compliancy Group does truly is we have built out a simplified, complete compliance program that MSPs, ITSPs, anybody in the technology world can use first to secure the flag in your own organization. Building out that complete compliance program around those 7 fundamental elements that I've talked about, and managing your own risk. Secondarily, we are a partner to go in with you and actually sell and explain this conversation downstream to those customers. You're in technology. It is very hard in many cases to have the conversation about the administrative and privacy and functional and organizational pieces of this. We are your partner truly, both in delivering the service, but bringing that client on board and having that conversation. It's one of the things that's different about us. We're not a set it and forget it. Here's your thing, run away. We will be with you and work with you to deliver compliance internally and externally, and we'll help you close the deal.
Cool. Thank you very much for that, Paul. I appreciate that. Bessie, back to you in the studio.
Oh, just let's move to final thoughts.
Oh man, I am so glad that Paul came on the show today. We there's so much to think about when it comes to compliance and all these regulations out there, and just to know that the Compliancy Group is there to help us figure out how to bring a compliance program to market and really enable our partners, or our end customers, to be compliant and avoid all this junk we were just talking about. So thank you, Paul, again for coming on. I think what you're doing is great for our community. So thank you. Bessie, what you got?
I think I really was struck by the idea of just not trying to make it scary and confusing for your clients, and thinking about how can you speak to them in a way, in a business way, in a way that makes sense to them and that they're going to understand. And even though it might be scary, not to try to pass that fear down to them, and just to gain more and more knowledge, and be able to explain to your clients in a way that makes sense to them. Chris, what do you think?
This, you know what? This stuff sometimes creeps me out. Like, I'm not a big horror movie fan, and I think about, the topics we've had all this month, cybersecurity. It's easy to kind of get overwhelmed and kind of freaked out. I know I can when I talk to, Paul or any of the guests we've had this month. But one of the things that Paul said that really struck me was have the conversations. And I think oftentimes I think about, my own, fear of the dark a lot of times, of just turning on the light and being aware. Really, okay, it kind of takes away. It doesn't take it away. It doesn't make it not real. But having the conversations with your clients is so critical right now. And I think through the tools, and so much what Academy's doing, really helping partners position themselves and to get better at having those conversations about security with their partners. So I'm really glad of what we're doing this month. So that's my thoughts.
Well, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check us out next week. Our guest will be Eric Levitas. He's the Director of Commercial Growth for Edwards Performance Solutions. So we'll be talking a lot more about CMMC and how you can get certified. So remember, we are live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, and we're on demand always. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Rexley, close us out.
Vision without execution is hallucination. Take what you heard today, decide what action you're going to take, and think about what you're going to do tomorrow. Thank you and goodbye.